Welcome back. We're here to discuss Sunday's Premier League match between Aston Villa and Manchester City. Barnes will start with Villa. There's a new manager there with Remy Gard.
Yeah, it's an interesting appointment, isn't it? He's the one they seem to want. He was the one that was top of their list, it seemed, from the start, and they got him. Interesting appointment, I think. He's got some experience of the Premier League, which should be important. He's got he played with Arsenal towards the end of his playing career, was linked to Arsenal as a director of football post not too long ago, actually. So he does have experience of the English game. You'd think that he's pretty knowledgeable about the English game as well. But there are still question marks. He hasn't been a manager in England yet. He's only had one managerial post in his career. That was with Lyon from 2011 to 2014. It was, which he won the cup there. It was a decent spell, 51% win ratio during his time there, which is pretty good. It wasn't the Lyon that we were used to seeing from 2000 to 2010 when they were winning the title almost every season, it seemed. That was a golden period for them. But Lyon, they're not traditionally one of the biggest teams in France, so it was always going to happen that they're going to go through a bit of a balance spell. Gard was in charge for a bit of that, but as I say, it wasn't the worst time in charge. This is a much tougher job for him. Obviously, I mentioned this 51% win ratio. Aston Villa are going to be expecting a lot lower than that because they're not going to win as many games in the Premier League as Lyon did in their league. So it's a tough ask for him, it really is. He's taken over a team who've lost 7 Premier League games on the bounce, lost 9 of the last 10, 1 point since the opening day of the season. It's a dreadful run of form. It needs to stop. You'd think with a new manager coming in, that might be the chance to help it happen, but whatever happens, it's going to be an uphill struggle for him, I think.
Yeah, he was in the stands for their game on Monday night at Spurs, which they lost 3-1, like you say, another defeat there, and certainly they improved in the second half, but it was always going to be tough to come back after conceding 2 in the first half. The first goal that Dembele scored, he was allowed too easily to get into the box and then squeeze a shot under Guzan. Goalkeeper shouldn't be conceding from that tight an angle, and then they half clear a ball right at the end of the half, which is a real killer blow, and Dele Alli, he stuck it in. It was a good little touch and finish, to be fair to him. And after half time, Ayew and Hill came on, and they impressed me, those two players, actually. They really did inject some life into the game, because first half for Villa was really poor, and I mean, Gabby Agbonlahor only had 8 first half touches, didn't he? Which is just shockingly bad, lowest of any player this season. 2 of those were kick off as well. So he was barely in the game, but those two players, Ayew and Hill, really came on, did make a difference. It was Ayew who got the goal, 2-1 there, and they got lucky with the deflection, but that's they maybe needed that luck because they weren't really doing much else in the game, and they sort of threatened a tiny bit like they might get the second, but then Spurs killed it off with Harry Kane getting the goal there. So it was always going to be a tough ask. Spurs, they're unbeaten since the opening day, but there was a few positive signs with those two players. I wouldn't be surprised if they come and start the next game now, which is obviously Gard's first proper game in charge.
It's certainly a difficult start for Gard, isn't it? You couldn't have wished for tougher opponents. The league leaders, Manchester City. The big hope, probably the only hope for Villa in this match, is that the players tend to raise their games under a new manager. You've got players who perhaps didn't get much of a look in under Sherwood, wanting to prove to the new man that they deserve a place in the starting 11. Players who were in the starting 11 under Sherwood trying to keep hold of their jobs and prove that they deserve to carry on in the side. So you do usually get a reaction, but as I mentioned, it's going to be a tough one against Manchester City. They would have preferred his first game in charge to come against a team probably around them in the table that they might fancy their chance of beating. But if they get anything out of this game going into the national break, it's going to be a huge bonus for them, even with the expected raising level of a performance that usually comes with a new manager. Even after the international break, they've then got Everton away from home, which is a very, very tough match. They probably wouldn't be expecting much out of that. So it's a tough start for Gard. After that, they've got Watford at home. Probably of his first 3 fixtures, you'd say that's the one he'd earmark as the first to get a victory out of. But even then, Watford are doing well. They're in decent form at the moment, so that's not going to be an easy game. Certainly not an easy start for Gard. It's not going to be an easy season for him, to be honest.
It's not. No, I think he'll hope that City are in the kind of similar sort of form they were last weekend. They hosted Norwich, and they weren't at their best City in that game by any stretch of the imagination. They came through 2-1 in the end. It could have been 3-1. Kolarov missed the late penalty, but City certainly weren't at their best. They took the lead. Otamendi, it was a great header from him. I think it was his first City goal. Really powered it in, but then Joe Hart with one of the worst mistakes I've seen from a goalkeeper in a long time. It wasn't like he was that off balance. He just lost the grip on the ball, gifted it to Cameron Jerome. He stuck it away. That's the 83rd minute, and you think Norwich maybe get a draw out of this one. But then at the other end, fellow sort of England goalkeeper John Ruddy, he made a poor mistake as well. Lost his way in the box. Then Russell Martin clearly used his arm to block the shot, gifted them a penalty. Yaya Toure stuck it away. I think he scored all 9 of his Premier League penalties, so he's good from the spot there. But they weren't at their best there, but then in midweek on Tuesday, they were pretty good away at Sevilla in the Champions League, secured their spot in the last 16 with a 3-1 win there. First English team to win in that stadium, so quite an impressive feat. And they had good performances from players who been on the fringes a bit. Fernandinho got a goal. Jesus Navas had one of his best games for City as well, actually. So for them to do that, they're already qualified, which is quite impressive considering where they were. They lost to Juventus in their first game, but for them to then, win all three against Mönchengladbach and then Sevilla twice, I won't say they were most convincing, in some of those games, but 3 wins out of 3, qualified now, along with the likes of Real Madrid through to the last 16. So that's good for them.
Yeah, they have struggled in Europe recently, haven't they, over the past few years? So they seem to finally be starting to get the hang of it, which will be important. Remains to be seen again if there's any European hangover going into this weekend's match, but they come into it in great form, unbeaten in 8 games in all competitions. They've won 7 of those games. The one concern for that probably would be that they've only kept 1 clean sheet in that unbeaten run, and that was the only game that they didn't win. That was the goalless draw against Manchester United in the derby, which, let's be honest, it wasn't the most inspiring match, was it? It was a pretty poor game from both sides, and City were probably second best out of the 2 teams in that one as well. So that will be a concern for Pellegrini, that they're not keeping clean sheets, and especially with the likes of Aguero on the sideline still. They can't always rely on them to outscore opponents because they're missing their best striker, their most potent striker. They obviously have still got goals through the likes of Bonny and Kevin De Bruyne. Sterling De Bruyne in particular made a fantastic start to his City career, but they can't keep relying on them to outscore opponents, especially without Aguero on the field. But as things stand, they're still top of the table, ahead of Arsenal on goal difference, so things are looking good for City at the moment.
Yeah, they are. David Silva, I've read that he could be back this weekend, but it's unlikely, I think, that Pellegrini would risk him, don't you think? Because you think surely City, they'd be confident beating Villa in this game, even with a new manager. So I'd be surprised if Silva starts. Maybe he'd be back on the bench for this one, but which way do you see this one going?
Yeah, I don't see this as being as big a banker as it might have been perhaps with Villa under Tim Sherwood, or perhaps with Villa under no manager, but it's still hard to see Villa getting anything out of the game, isn't it? The way they're performing, the way City are performing, I can see a relatively comfortable City win. Not a blowout, but I can see probably a 3-1 City win.
3-1, yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, I fancy City to get at least 2 goals in this one, and I think Villa might nick 1 here and there, like you say, because City haven't been keeping many clean sheets of late. But I fancy them to win 3-1 as well. So both back in the visitors to win this one 3-1. Thanks for joining us.